Welcome back to Heart Path Podcast. I'm your host, Terra Kenzie Longacre, a modern day mystic, author, transformational and spiritual embodiment coach, and retreat leader. In each episode, we will explore topics around spirituality, empowerment, divine embodiment, resiliency of the human spirit, and heart-based business and beyond. In today's episode, we are talking about the abandonment wound. Yes, folks, you heard that right. The abandonment wound. We're going to talk about origins of when this can take root in our life. We're going to also talk about the way that abandonment wounds can show up in our life. And they can create devastating impacts, not only for ourselves, but the people that we have connections with or the people that we have relationships with. And something that I found, God, it was eye-opening for myself in 2023, the summer of 2023. The blinders were taken off to the fact that I had an abandonment wound that was very active and very present in my life that I had no clue was there. Because, when you're on the path of self-healing and development, you go there. Right? You explore your childhood, you explore, all the times and ways you've been hurt. You go into the wounds that you have generally on your path of self-development, healing, and transformation. However, this happens in layers, and we talk about this all the time. Healing happens in layers, there are layers to the transformation, and the layers go deep. We talk about this. And it was shocking, to be quite honest. I can't even mince words. In the summer of 2023, when I realized I had abandonment wounds that I thought I had dealt with them. I thought through my therapy, through my spiritual path, and all of the self-development and healing work that I had been doing for years for myself, I thought, that abandonment wound has been laid to rest. And boy, let me tell you, no, it was there and it was very active. And when, like I said, the blinders came off, so much more made sense of specific behaviors that I was expressing in my life, my world, my relationships, specific behaviors I was allowing to take place in my life. Everything made sense. I'm like, oh, I see you, abandonment wound. I see you, scared little girl. Oh, and I laugh about it now because I truthfully thought that it had been worked with. I thought it was gone. And some of you might be in that situation as well, where you've chosen the path of self-exploration, self-development, and to heal and transform your lives. And you've gone into the trenches of it, because it is the trenches to dig up, and we don't always have to ruminate in the past traumas. However, to have the courage and the bravery to say, you know what, this happened in my life and I can't change what happened in my life, but I can change its impact. Because that's truthfully, the road of healing and transformation is being able to reclaim your power, or period, being able to reclaim your power from those experiences, to take your life back and to change the future impact that it has on you. And I know, to begin with, I grew up as an only child, and my mom was my main parent, and she had left my dad. Gosh, I think I must have been 2 or 3. I was very young. My dad had a lot of unresolved trauma in his life. He had a rough childhood. He had a rough life. He chose the path of substance use and alcoholism to cope with it, which I totally get, because, apple doesn't fall far from the tree, fall far from the tree, because Yeah, I went down that path too. I get it. So my mom ended up leaving him when I was really, really young, but like then that was it. There was no dad in my life. And the interesting thing is I never ever asked her about my dad, which from an outside perspective, like as I was getting older, I'm like, that's really strange that you've never I never asked her who my dad was. I never asked questions. It's just like it was just something that I never wanted to explore or even felt inclined to ask about. And now, going through life and being, adult on their healing transformational journey, I feel like it was too painful to go there. And that could have been a protection mechanism. Like our minds are very powerful. Our conscious mind, or even like we could say the ego, will try to protect us at all cost, right? The ego does not want harm. It's so there's different mechanisms, safety mechanisms put in place. And it was just interesting. And I still think about that. I'm like, I never asked, ever. I did, like, it was like, I don't have a dad. I don't, but at the same time, I do have memories, like and my dad, can we just say my dad is in my life now? We got reconnected um probably in my early 20s or 20. Somewhere along that line. So we're reconnected. He's in my life. It has been a path of returning and recovery for both of us, and the relationship that we have, it's beautiful to know that there was no relationship, no contact at all, to being able to really connect. I feel like with him, it's really on a soul level, and we understand each other, and we're very similar too. So yeah, for those of you that have grown up in homes maybe where your parents haven't been around, that because a lot of the time these abandonment wounds really do take shape and form in our lives when we're younger. So much of it can happen in childhood. And could we say at the same time, the parenting doesn't come with a handbook. There are books out there, but like nobody has it figured out. Nobody has it figured out. And so your parents most likely did not have it figured out either. And depending on where their backgrounds have come from, like let's say you grew up in a home with like where there's no emotions in your family, there's no emotional connection. Like who knows, maybe your folks grew up that way where emotions were repressed, you didn't talk, and then they're awkward in their world and they don't know how to handle their emotions or express emotions or communicate, and then you're in that family and you're this emotional being that just wants love me and they want that connection. You want that connection, but it's not there because they don't know how to give you that connection. And then there could be an abandonment wound or the rejection wound, right? That comes up for that. And it's not that the parents are intentionally trying to be emotionally cold or unemotional. It's just like they don't know how to from their experiences. So it's just so much. I joke about this all the time with our soul expressions and soul incarnations that we have. It's like the family that you are born into, that your soul chose, mind you, the family that you're born into, that your soul chose you and your family. That is the boot camp. Our family of origin is the training grounds, the boot camp where some of the most challenging, painful at times lessons can come from. Not always, however, a lot of the time. And so often these wounds take root, but you might not know that they're there. So even, for example, like I've done my work. I will never claim, though, like, can we just clear the air? And for all of us on our healing and transformational journeys, it's a dangerous place to claim that you are fully healed and you are done your healing. Okay, just like throwing that out, disclaimer, because you might think you are in different ways, and then you will be shown where you're not. So yeah, the summer of 2023. And the funny thing is, when I had shared that with some people of, I have an abandonment wound, like this is insane to even see it and recognize it. And at the time I had come into a separation space with my partner, who we're now reconciled and building day by day. We're here day by day in the rebuilding of that relationship. However, I had shared that with someone, and it was like probably a mutual, and they're like, what are you talking about, abandonment wound? You left them. Like, it was almost like they were really confused why I was sharing I had an abandonment wound, because I was doing a lot of processing of like everything, the disintegration of the relationship, the separation, and then within that of like, holy crow, like this abandonment wound is like very active, and you didn't see it, you didn't even know it was there, but they couldn't understand it. But I had a wonderful experience in that summer of 2023 with a connection with another soul that activated that actually took the blinders off to show me, oh my gosh, hi abandonment wound, I see you. And then when you see it, like, that's the whole thing. Once you identify these wounds that are there, that are very active, that are taking the wheel, sometimes it's like you're not even driving the vehicle, it's these wounds, and they've got their clutches around the wheel and operating everything like autopilot. Because even some of you might relate to this. So, like I said, I had been doing my own personal work and therapy and just like all of the things to become a better human. I remember being in junior high and looking at self-development books, like, and into psychology. I've just always wanted to understand perhaps why I was so messed up. I don't know. I was like, why am I messed up? Like, what, why can't I be normal, quote unquote normal? Why do I feel all the things I feel? And then with time, of course, it was like, oh, you are highly intuitive, and you're just, you're picking up on a lot of other things, which helped, definitely helped on the journey. And for those intuitive folks and highly sensitive people out there, you know what I'm talking about, because so much, might not even be yours, but you don't understand, and you don't have the language for it. So even in terms of, having active abandonment wounds, I was a serial relationship runner. Serial relationship runner. I had never in my whole life, what, like, friendships, lovers, well, the lovers was a little bit different. The lovers, yeah, maybe I would be left behind in those cases, but relationships, serial relationship runner. I had never been broken up with. Nobody had ever left me. And I feel like that track record is still a thing in this moment. But at the same time, a high abandonment wound. I'm going to be disconnected and leave before I get hurt. But does that ever really happen? Like, come on, y'all. Does that ever really happen? I'm going to leave before I get hurt? No. No. Because, if you're having trauma bonds with folks, it's just like, there's going to be some hurt, because you're working through, if you choose, you're working through that to become a better person and to heal that. But yeah, I laugh about it, because I literally, like, every relationship, I would be the one to leave and sabotage. So these are the things, so I'm talking from personal experience, but you might be relating to this as well, because these are the ways the abandonment wounds can show up. So even, like, to talk about abandonment wound a little bit more, like with a little bit more depth, like that can feel a lack of self-worth, not feeling lovable, not feeling like, okay, so self-worth, not feeling lovable, not feeling wanted, needing to have people with you, and like sometimes you might be outsourcing your sense of validation and like your worth and how you are as a human from how other people treat you or perceive you. So that can happen, and that could be, you know, like if we want to get into the meat so to speak of the abandonment wound. And it's just like at the end of the day, it's just like wanting someone to see you, value you, appreciate you, and love you. Like you just want to be loved. You want to love and be loved. It's like to love and be loved. And that's the core of the abandonment wound. You just want to love and be loved. And for whatever experiences you've had in your childhood, those needs weren't met. But once again, like this is the other thing too, to go back to the parents, and just humans in general in your life. For the most part, we're all doing the best that we can with what we have in any given moment. And I feel like I talk about this a lot too, and you know, it's cliche for a reason, and it's true. You know, sometimes if you are stressed to the max or so much stuff's going on in your world, it's hard to even think or be outside of your world. Or if you're in survival mode, like it's just really hard to give anything else beyond you're in survival mode. So perhaps, like for an example, let's say you're the little one, and you wanted mom or dad's attention, or you know, or whoever the parent was, you wanted their attention. And who knows, like what if they're stressing out about how they're going to pay the bills and they're working so much. And I just have to give a shout out to the single moms. My mom was a single mom, and that lady worked hard. Shout out to them, because like you have to have a job to pay the bills, and then you have to be a parent, which is a job. Being a parent is a job. It is a job, you know. So it's just, there's so much there. And so let's say, for example, you needed that attention or affection or whatever from your parent, and they're stressed out about how they're going to pay the bills. They're literally like in this high state of survival or stress or whatever is going on for them, so they couldn't talk to you in that moment. Or they're working a lot, so you don't see them, but because they have to work. But as a child in that moment, you don't understand that, right? And then as you start to become more mature and you're going through life, and then you're realizing, oh, I see what adulting is all about. I get it. And if you choose to go on that path of, because this is not everybody chooses this either, and I know you all know this, but like if you choose to go on that path of self-development and healing, because that's a choice. That's a choice. And not everybody wants to go there because it's so painful. Not everybody wants to go there because sometimes people are addicted to their misery. Full transparency. People can be addicted to their misery because that might be what they're used to. That's their normal. That's what makes them feel safe and comfortable, even though it's not safe and comfortable. So huge indicators of how these abandonment wounds are going to show up in your life. Like there is that fear of rejection. So think of like the abandonment. You don't want to be abandoned. You want people to be there, but there's going to be the fear of rejection too. Like are you going to be received as the love that you are, or the way that you are? Like this is where we're talking about seeking external validation. You're just like, because you might not be able to see it in yourself, especially if you've grown up believing that there's something inherently wrong with you, or like, why are you even here? You're not meant to be here. You don't have a place here. You don't have a right here. Like that comes up with clients a lot. And I love it when that comes up, because we blast Care Bear stare with compassion and forgiveness, but we extract that, because that's not the truth, and that's not your truth. We all have a right to be here. We are all valuable. We are all children of God, source, creator, the divine. We all have a right to be here, and we all matter. You have a right to be here, and you matter. And if there's been those beliefs that are kicking around, and from your life's experience, like folks that have been adopted, and just, there's a lot of trauma there of not being wanted. I know so many people that have been adopted clients, and it's just, there is this. And how could you not think differently of not being wanted, even if you are so lucky to be brought into a new family that's so happy to have you and loves you, right? You could have the best adopted family, and at the same time, there will be that core wound of not being wanted. What was wrong? You could think, what was wrong with you? And nothing. Nothing. Like, you're born as, this beautiful expression and perfection of the divine. Nothing. The inception of your creation might not have been rooted in love, but that doesn't mean that you are. So, that the fear of rejection can be really, really active, where if you've grown up feeling that you don't have a right to be here, that you're not lovable, all of those stories which are not your truth. I have to stress that it's not your truth. You might not be able to find that support inside. And even saying this, like, there's so many people hurting on our planet. There's so many people hurting. And we can't change the past. We can't take back experiences that have happened, that have caused the harm, or that continue to perpetuate the hurting because of the impact. But at the same time, the more that we choose to take the brave steps and courage for that self-development and healing and forgiveness, the impacts change. But you don't know until you know, right? And you will never know until you know. It might feel like things are unforgivable, or things could never be healed, but they can be. However, it might take time. It might take lots of therapy. It might take Jesus in some cases, there's pathways to healing for many different people, right? So it's just knowing that there's nothing inherently wrong with you. You have a right to be here, and you do have the power to heal and transform your life. And I just, if there are some people that know me from before, because when I say that, we have the ability to heal and transform our lives, this is not me just saying that to bring inspiration into the conversation. No, this is real talk. This is real talk. And perhaps there will be another podcast about about the other lifetimes that I have had and walked in this lifetime. There will be, there has to be, addiction needs to, there's just so many rabbit holes to go down. But at the same time, I feel, and I'm not perfect by any means, there's still more to go deeper into, and I will take full responsibility for that and devotion to that. And at the same time, I am a very different person, or living, because at the core, I've always been Terra. I've always been this person, but I'm living a very different life. Sometimes when I reflect on those different lifetimes, where you've had multiple lifetimes in a lifetime, if you're here, I see you, boo. 2025 is already feeling like multiple lifetimes in a lifetime. But, when I look back at some of those points in my life, I am so grateful to be alive. And sometimes I question, I'm like, how am I still here? Wow. How am I still here? Because there were many times where, I might not be here. So I'm so grateful to be alive, and so grateful to have had all of those experiences, even the darkest the darkest, most destructive parts of life, when you're in those spaces, when you come out of it, like, the darkness, how low you can go, and you're not going there again. And sometimes you might backslide. Yeah, because healing, transformation happens in layers. So sometimes you might backslide, but it's just like when you have gone to the pits of hell, we could even say, and you come out, it's just how can you not be a different person? How can you not be a different person? So it is never, never too late to change your life. It is never too late to heal and transform. It is never too late to be free of those abandonment wounds. It's never too late. And the thing is, where I'm laughing, it's like 2023, like, didn't even know it was there. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes so much more sense. This like really explains a lot more. But it was a beautiful opportunity. Thank you, Spirit, for opening my eyes, for showing me. And that will happen for you as well. If you're going through the initiatory gateways of transformation, you will be shown the layers. And I say this as well, like, you're not given more than you can handle. Sometimes it feels like it. Ooh, sometimes it feels like it, but you will never be given more than you can handle. And remember that. It's even like trusting that what God, Source, Creator puts on your plate, it's like chow down, because you can handle it, you can digest it. So people pleasing, that can happen. How are abandonment wounds showing up? Like, we were talking about seeking that external validation of like, tell me you love me, oh, I'm lovable, coming, like, not from you, not from the divine, trying to outsource it from people, but people pleasing. Like, where you will bend over backwards because we're saying this, it's like you're there to help people. Yeah, you're there to help people, and at the same time, are you trying to prove your worth? Bending over backwards for people, trying to prove your worth, but you might not know that's what's happening. If the abandonment wound is running high, you are just wanting, and not to say that you're not kind and loving and caring. You absolutely are kind and loving and caring, and you absolutely do want to help people, and you want to be there for them. And and you might knowingly or unknowingly be trying to prove your worth, because that people pleasing, so often people are upset that they're not being appreciated, that they're not being valued. I'm doing all of this for you and you don't appreciate it. When we're there to help people, yes, it's nice to be appreciated, but it's not to get anything. Really, if you are trying to help someone from the kindness of your heart, it doesn't matter if it's reciprocated. You're not trying, it's like, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. It's not that. You're there to help. And so often, and once again, with clients, I would see this come up a lot. Like, a lot of y'all are reformed people pleasers. Yes. However, when you were in the throes of it, so much resentment, so much frustration. Why won't they appreciate me? I'm not valued. I'm not, they're not helping because you're not letting them help. But like, you see where we're going, and in the forefront of the conscious mind, it feels like you're helping and trying to prove your worth. If I just do this thing, then maybe I'm lovable. If I just do this thing, then maybe they'll see how valuable I am. And remember, this is subconscious programming. And so often these are the little children inside of us. This is our inner child. This is like the little you that's screaming to be seen and loved and valued, and bending over backwards, and it not being given, you're not being given what you want in that moment. So like I said, these abandonment wounds, like relationships, is where it is just gonna be activated, triggered, Codependency, I am going to raise my hand. I'm going to raise both hands to codependency. Oh my gosh. The irony though is I can be very independent. Like I love my independence as, you know, a sovereign, powerful woman. Oh, I'm rolling my eyes a little bit. Kudos to all the empowered women out there. But like for me, I'm saying this and I'm kind of rolling my eyes for myself, not for anybody else. But yeah, no, I love my independence and I can be a really independent woman. However, yeah, codependency just gets fired up when you are in a relationship and you have the abandonment wound. Like it's almost like your existence is connected to this person, your safety. So could we say your emotional security and your emotional safety, if that person is dysregulated, that affects you. So we create our own safety. You create your own emotional security. You create your own emotional safety. Like not to seek that from another person. But when you're in the codependent relationships, you might not be able to regulate yourself. You might not be able to make yourself feel emotionally stable, emotionally secure. And then you're trying to get that from your partner, your parent, your friend, your boss, whatever that is in that dynamic. And they might not be able to give it to you. They might not be capable of giving it to you. And then, but then it gets internalized. You internalize it. So it's just like the codependency, it like that can be such a slippery slope for folks. Cause can you imagine? It's like, you know, two people with abandonment wounds coming together and it's just like, ooh, how is that working? How are they supporting each other? If it's just like, and then our cycles of toxicity from that, because it's the trauma bonding, it's the abandonment wounds coming together. And there's just different dynamics of how that can play out. But like these cycles of toxicity or trauma replaying and replaying and replaying, but neither one having the coping skills to navigate that, to move through it, to heal it together. That's not everybody's scenario or circumstance. Sometimes those trauma bonds or those traumatic wounds that come up together could be healed in relationship. So they can be healed in relationship, but you need both parties on board. Both people in any of the relationships, whether it's parents, lover, partner, friends, both people need to be on board. Because that you might know this as well and have experienced that in your life. Like one person could be doing all the healing and the self-development and the growth, but if their other counterpart isn't, like what's the point? Because that person has to choose. They have to choose to want to be a better person. They have to choose to want to do the healing, and then separation happens. You know, you just become distant from each other because you're almost in two different two different paradigms, or maybe even parallel realities after. Especially if you're meeting each other in those abandonment wounds, and then like the one person's healing it and then they want to like go because they're abandonment wound free and come with me. But how can they come with, you know? So it's just like, that is another way. That is another way that it will show up. The self-sabotage. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but like even where I was saying, like, I always left the relationships. It's just, and like, I'm not proud of that now, but there was one point in time where I think it was, I don't know, I was kind of like, I don't leave relationships. See, another lifetime ago, with different beliefs, different values, different ideas on life and relationship and men specifically. Your girl definitely had different viewpoints on the value and the worth of men, which has transformed as well. At the same time, I'm very aware of those beliefs that were there, that were a way of life for me. So even for those of you that have gone through a lot of self-development and transformation, it's really important to, you know, once again, we're not holding on to the past. But at the same time, it's important to not forget where you might have exploited your power in different ways. Because even though you're grown and you're evolved and you've done your healing and you're doing the things, it's very important to remember where you could have exploited power in previous situations so that you know it and that you remember it and you won't return to it. So with the self-sabotage and relationships, you might push people away. You might not let people get close to you. Like you might in friendships or relationships, they only get like the filtered version of you. They don't get the unfiltered version. You're not telling them vulnerable things. Like the not being able to trust others can come up too, right? So that, like we're saying, self-sabotage of relationships, but not being able to trust, because you might not be opening yourself up and being close to people because you don't trust them. What are they going to do with this information? If I tell them, are they going to leave? Right? These are active programs that you might not know are there. And it can be really hard to open yourself up to trust with that abandonment wound there, because it might not feel safe. It might not feel safe. And we can't guarantee that we're going to be 100% safe out in the world or out in relationships. Like, it takes courage and bravery to be yourself, to speak your truth, to be vulnerable. Being vulnerable is probably one of the most courageous acts that you can do, especially in relationship. Because it might not be understood. It might not be received the way you wanted, needed, but it's such a gift to give yourself to do that. So what about when we get triggered, right? Like when we're saying a lot of the abandonment wounds, it's like that inner child, well, the abandonment wound, it's driving the vehicle, but like so much of it is your inner child, them, like in fear or rejection or whatever they were experiencing. So when you get triggered, and something that I will just continue to speak about, The Presence Process by Michael Brown. Highly recommend this book. I had owned the book for about 7 years and had always wanted to do it and just never did until February of 2024. Something clicked where it's like, Tara, you are going to do The Presence Process by Michael Brown. It's 10 weeks. It's a committed devotion and practice. And 7 years later, like, isn't that funny? Having this book for about 7 years, never doing it. And then it was the time. And what was really impactful for me, which is why I'm bringing it up within that book, was talking about triggers. And knowing that when we get triggered or activated, like those are messengers for us. And often it has nothing to do with the present moment. Like it could be something from our childhood, that inner child, where the root of that trigger when the trigger took root. So when you're getting triggered, it might not have anything to do with you or that person or that situation in this moment. How wild is it to think about that? It's something from another time and another place in this life from childhood. So to really be aware of that, if you're finding yourself getting triggered or it's just, exploding, it's like something that has been a deep hurt or wound has been activated and almost reawoken in the from the subconscious mind, brought to the conscious mind, but then projected into this now moment. So I now, like, before and I realized I was very reactive through that experience of the presence process, where I didn't think I was. I didn't think I was reactive. And so once again, humbling times of transformation and embodiment. But at the same time, think of the triggers. So this was in the presence process. It's not even about the messenger, it's about the message, right? Because these people, these situations, they are the messengers trying to bring you a message. And then it's on you to explore, what is this message? Where did this start? If you get triggered and you feel angry or you feel disappointed, could you go into that felt, sensed feeling? Like, could you go into the feeling beyond what's happening in the external world, beyond anything that has been happening, the situation, the person, they're not part of the equation in that moment, and go into that first initial felt sense. And then you might find yourself being brought back to like 5 or 6 years old, and people were making fun of you, and it made you really angry because you didn't understand. It is amazing what will come to the surface, like that expression, ask and you shall receive. It is amazing to see what will come from that when you ask, and you're willing to do the work, you're willing to explore. Ooh, okay. So other ways abandonment wounds can come up. We've talked about, like the low self-worth and the seeking and the validation and the people pleasing, and just like needing to have that external validation and needing to outsource that love that you are. And once again, yeah, like self-worth might be low. We talked about this. You might not believe you're good enough. You might question who you are and how you are, and bring yourself down, like negative mind chatter, stopping yourself from doing things or saying things. Loneliness is a major symptom for abandonment wounds. So you might feel painfully lonely, or this is the other flip of the coin, isolation. You might feel lonely and like an outcast from the world, like nobody gets you, and you just kind of you subscribe to going into these feelings of loneliness and being lonely. Or you might isolate yourself, you might disconnect from other people. So yeah, like chronically feeling lonely or having yourself in states of isolation can be an effect of the abandonment wound. And especially like if we're looking at loneliness, you might have experienced through your life that nobody understands you, nobody gets you. And then we could peel back the layers of that. Nobody loves me, all these stories that you're unlovable, that you're unworthy, on and on and on and on. And then you've got that playing in your mind. So if you're lonely and nobody's there, well, of course, because X, Y, and Z, what we just talked about. It makes sense that you're lonely because you're not lovable, you're not worthy. These are all lies. These are all lies. You are lovable, you are worthy. And sometimes on this path, especially the path of spiritual evolution, like that path can be lonely, because not everybody is going to understand it. Not everybody's going to get it. You might lose people in your life because you're wanting to better yourself, because you're wanting to explore who you are as a divine being. You might lose people in your life. You might choose isolation as well. Like I'll have to say for myself, I isolate far too much. I joke that I'm a hermit. Like I just love to be alone. And I don't necessarily feel lonely because I enjoy my company, and I know at the end of the day we're never really alone. Like we're never really alone. However, my isolation game is strong, and I don't necessarily always believe that's the best thing, to have a strong isolation game. But at the same time, it's interesting because I don't feel lonely, and I know other people suffer from loneliness. And I even, I've had some close and have close relationships where that's been a real big struggle for them. And at times it's been challenging for me, and I've been disconnected because I don't understand. Like I've been lonely. I understand the feeling because I've been there, but at the same time, I don't think I've truly suffered the perils of being lonely, because I've found peace within myself with being alone. if that makes sense. Maybe like, I'm saying these words and you might be resonating like, yeah, no, that makes sense. So for me, loneliness has not been a quote unquote debilitating struggle for me or a heart-wrenching struggle for me, but I do know that it affects people. And I now have a sensitivity to it, because you don't, like, this is the whole thing. If you don't understand things fully or you haven't experienced it, you can talk about it, you can have compassion for it, but you don't ever really know. And I've just, like, I grew up an only child. I just feel like I've been alone, like, for such a large part of my life, and I'm not afraid to do things alone. I take comfort and peace in physically being alone. And like I said, hermit, I love to isolate, but then once again, is that an abandonment when pushing people away? There's so many ways this could be looked at, but yeah, like I take comfort and solace in being alone. And then at the same time, someone that suffers from loneliness is going to have sorrow and despair in that, and potentially even depression. Right. So it's just like, how does that express itself? So yeah, the abandonment wound, there could be these feelings of loneliness because you haven't felt like you've belonged, because you don't feel like you're worthy, because on and on and on. So if you're not fully open or received in circles, or if you don't have a friend group of support and you need that or you want that and you're desiring that, then yeah, the loneliness is going to creep in, and it could feel like despair. Once again, do I know the depths of the despair through loneliness? I can't speak on it fully. I've been there. But at the same time, that was also before I really opened myself up to a spiritual connection. Now that I think about it, when I truly opened myself up to the divine and my spirituality, things started to change. So yeah, I have been lonely. Now that we're talking about it, it's like, yeah, there were some dark, see, these other lifetimes, there were some dark moments, very dark moments, full of despair and the loneliness. But that was like, it's almost like that happened for me personally in my life, which was the breaking point of my heart cracking open to God, source, creator, divine. Like that needed to happen to fully open myself up into the remembrance of the divinity. So for those of you that isolate, it could be it's not wanting people to get close to you. For those of you that feel this deep sense of loneliness, I just keep hearing where it's like going to that not feeling like you belong, or maybe being the black sheep, you didn't fit in and you don't feel lovable, you don't feel valuable, you don't feel worthy, and that path can feel alone. And especially when you're walking the world and thinking nobody understands you or gets you, that can feel lonely. And this is why I love, like, the spaces that I create with work, and even the podcast. Like this, the podcast is creating a space for people to come. It's, are we a community space that's interactive? No, but at the same time, you can come here and hear these topics and hear different conversations that are coming through, and knowing that you're not alone. Like, that's a huge piece. What I love about creating spaces for people to come together, whether it's retreats or group programs, is because the path can be lonely. And especially when you're first starting your spiritual awakening or spiritual path, it's just like, where do you start? People people might think you're crazy. It's like, oh, they've lost their mind. What are they even talking about? Energy, so it's just, it can feel very lonely. But then it's like you find your people, you find your tribe. There's those soul reunions that happen. There's so much more to this too. It's like, oh, I just looked at the time. We've been talking for a while. Yeah, there's so much more that we could go into this with the abandonment wounds. Like I said, and I still laugh. It's like July 2023. Or sorry, it wasn't July. Summer of 2023. I literally had, like, these blinders were on. I had no clue that there was an abandonment wound there. And it became so apparent. It was like, it was painfully obvious when I saw it and became aware of it. And I couldn't even fathom. I'm like, how did I not know this was how did I not know this wasn't here? Like that's where I was at. I'm like, how did I not know this wasn't here? Because everything started to make sense. Like in specifically in what had been going on in my life and my relationship for like a couple years. I'm like, oh my gosh. And not to mention, like, I was doing personal development, I was doing therapy throughout that time as well. So it's not like I was not doing my work, but that was hiding, you know, for whatever reasons and the ways that it was. But it wasn't hiding. Like I'm saying it was hiding. It was hiding from me. It was evading my awareness, but it was not hiding. When you review and you go back and you see certain behaviors and thoughts and just all of it, you're like, oh gosh, this makes so much sense. So on the path of recovery from the abandonment wounds, please know that there are the layers to it, we said, and the layers run deep. So yes, you could have done the therapy, you could be doing the healing, you could be doing all of it, and they could still be there. And can we be okay with that? Can you be okay with that? Can you know that you're not perfect? You don't need to be quote unquote perfect. You're human, you're spirit in human form, but you're human. You're doing the best that you can. And can you look at yourself with compassion? Can you hold yourself with compassion? And can you, through that journey of discovery, right? The awareness, you know, it's there through that journey of discovery, holding yourself in compassion, can you now start to create opportunities that go against what that wound has been telling you or what has been reinforcing that wound? So even creating authentic connections. Perhaps you've been hiding. So now these are opportunities for you to be brave. Being authentic is an act of bravery. Being vulnerable, courageous. Yeah. Okay. So we understand like that could be feeling like you're going into a battlefield unarmed in different ways. However, could you even look at it of you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for that part of you, that inner child aspect of you, that those hurting parts of yourself that have always just wanted to be loved and held for who they are as they are, you know, nothing else. Like you are enough, period. Okay. And so to hold yourself in compassion, to start to create those opportunities of authenticity, of vulnerability, and to open yourself up to the knowing that it is never too late. You're not running behind. You're perfectly on time. You're in divine time. So healing and transformation is possible. It is never too late. And you might have others saying it's too late. You might have those voices in your head telling you it's too late, but it's never too late. But we have to choose. So you have to choose to be brave. You have to choose to be courageous. You have to choose to go and do the work and be committed to the work, to not run away from yourself. We didn't even say this. To not run away from yourself, because self-abandonment is a huge way that the abandonment wound shows up. Abandoning yourself to make everybody else happy, abandoning yourself, you know, to please the world. Something, and I just love that it's spun to this. When I struggled a couple years ago, when I was almost like I felt like I was being abandoned by people. Well, maybe not a couple years ago. This was a while ago. This was probably like 10 years ago. Saying a couple years ago, but it's just a dime in the bucket of time. Okay. So yeah, maybe 10 years ago, but it stuck for me. It really stuck for me because I would look at the external world and, maybe I felt abandoned. Somebody wasn't showing up for me the way that I wanted them to, which still, it has happened throughout the 10 years, but this is when it clicked for me. I actually stopped. I think I was journaling and I was venting about, yeah, somebody not showing up for me the way that I wanted them to or the way that I needed them to. And through that writing, like the pen stopped. And then I paused. And then the question after my venting of this person isn't showing up the way that I want them or need them to, the question that I then asked myself is, where are you not showing up for yourself? and to be quite honest, it didn't even feel like I wrote that question, like just because it was the expression of the emotions and then the question, where are you not showing up for yourself? And everything changed. The perspective completely shifted because it wasn't about them. It wasn't about them not showing up for the way that I needed them. It was that invitation to look in the mirror of where I wasn't showing up for myself, where I was abandoning myself. So even for you, if you find yourself with these questions of, feeling abandoned or they're not giving you what you need or being who you need, where are you not being that for yourself? And where are you not doing that for yourself? And we're going to close on that. That almost felt like a mic drop. So we will most likely revisit this topic again because there is so much to explore. But that is, in a nutshell, where the abandonment wounds can take root, where their origin and how they show up in your life. But then at the same time, ways to lovingly support yourself to move through them. Thank you for listening to today's episode. And before you go, I wanted to offer you an opportunity for reflection and contemplation. Was there anything in this episode that inspired you or that you can use in your life moving forward? If so, what was it? Ooh, and was there anything that felt uncomfortable? Were you getting triggered? Was there anything that was brought up in this episode that made you feel seen and understood? Taking a moment to bring those reflections into the sacred space of your heart or journal. And you can share with me on social media how this episode impacted you. I'd love to hear. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend, like, and subscribe. I appreciate you. Lots of love. Mwah!